Welcome back, everybody, to me being sort of alive and talking about the Wheel of Time. It's taken longer than I thought, but we're back with Lord of Chaos. That's book number 6, and I've started it finally. I wanted to start much earlier, but then I did get my new COVID booster shot, and that kind of knocked me out for a bit. And in case you're wondering why I have this wonderful scars on my face, it's because I valiantly fought the pavement. Don't ask. Anyway, I started Lord of Chaos, the prologue, and chapters 1, 2, and 3 so far, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Cheers. Alright, so, Lord of Chaos, book number 6, is another really long one. It's the longest one so far, just slightly longer than The Shadow Rising. And one thing that we notice right away is the pacing has slowed down some more. Like, there's, the prologue is super long and jumps around all kinds of things. And then we have 3 chapters that are basically all about Rand doing stuff, which is, training with a sword, then meeting Mazrim Time, a false dragon, and whatnot, and then going with him to that farm where Mazrim Time tests other potential men who can channel for Rand's build us a magic user army kind of program. And those are 3 chapters, and they're and nothing really happens in those. I mean, not much at least. And we're going back to the little bit that really happens that is annoying in a bit. But compared to earlier books, especially the first book, or even the second book, right? Compared to those books, 3 chapters in which Rand talks to people, and that's it. That's really slow pacing. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mind slow pacing. I'm just saying it is noticeable that at this point, it's not that there is much more happening in these books. It's just that Robert Jordan has slowed down and is using, way more pages to put in all kinds of details. Now, that's sort of where we can talk about whether that is good or bad, but that's, I guess, is a matter of taste. I just wanted to note this right away. It's not only because there's way more happening than in book 1 that this is slow, that this is, a bigger book. It's also because we take much longer to explore everything. So yeah, but then again, maybe this is sort of what Robert Jordan felt like writing in any case, and after getting, a bit of his confidence together after publishing the first 4 or 5 books, because we can notice this slowdown in I guess Shadow Rising and Fires of Heaven already. It's sort of he's more comfortable with the voice that he wants to have for Wheel of Time. So I'll just leave it at that and not use it as a criticism, just to point it out that it is one of the reasons why these books have gotten larger and longer. Now, let's look at the annoying bits and the good. Well, there's not that much good, but, mostly mildly annoying stuff here. All right. Now, we start out with a very long prologue that jumps around between all kinds of groups. It's the usual thing, right? We just learn about all these different groups that we kind of check in. We meet, we kind of find out what's going on with Perrin and Fail. We see what the dark side is up to. We have a quick check-in with Elaine and Nynaeve and Min, and another short one with Gawain. So we're kind of, going all over the place, figuring out where everyone is that we left sometimes 2 books ago. Because, for example, Perrin and Fail, we met, we kind of didn't meet at all in Fires of Heaven. So that's, all in all, sort of like what you get in your older TV shows, previously on The Wheel of Time, and so forth. So we get this quick check-in. So I'm fine with that. Let's look at the bits that are, interesting or not so interesting. First of all, the bad guys. They suck. They still suck. Robert Jordan can't write evil for shit. I'm sorry about that, but that's just the truth. His evil and dark side just doesn't work. And I figured out like one reason of why that is the case. And I've called it like corny and cheesy before, right? All the way back to the Great Hunt's prologue with, that like Christmas party of Evil Incorporated. And I've, sat down and given it some thought of like what my problem there is, and with this prologue it was even more pronounced, so I'll kind of try to explain where the problem is. And I think the problem is that Robert Jordan is writing too much about it. He's getting too detailed, and this is especially obvious at the beginning of this with the parts about the Forsaken Demon Dread, who is traveling to whatever the place is called, like at the mountains of Sheol Ghul, and to that portal and talking to the Dark One himself and stuff. That's sort of where it really, really, not shine, but where you can see the problem. And I'll use the comparison to Lord of the Rings here because I feel it's helpful. And there's obviously parallels there between, it's a fucking volcano and the Dark One is there and shit like that, right? And here's the problem. In something like The Lord of the Rings, which I will use as a positive example for what I think is my problem with it. And your mileage may vary, and that's fine. I'm not calling this badly written because it's a matter of taste, basically. And the problem is in, say, The Lord of the Rings, or even the Silmarillion or The Hobbit, which we don't know anything about the evil. Like about the architecture of evil, about those places of absolute evil. We know nothing about it. We don't know how Dol Guldur looks inside. We don't know how Barad-dûr looks. We don't know much about Minas Morgul either. We also know nothing about Thangorodrim in the Silmarillion. We just don't know. We just hear that those are places of evil. And the rest of it is given over to our personal imagination. And I think that's a very powerful thing. Now, I'm talking the books. I'm not talking the movies, because I think the movies are kind of doing this thing already that that Robert Jordan also does. And that is visualize that kind of stuff for us in a specific way, right? And I think that's a problem, because evil, or darkness, or whatever you want to call it, like actual evil, supernatural evil, and we're talking supernatural evil here, is a very personal thing. So what I find scary and shocking and whatnot may differ wildly from what you find scary, dark, evil, or whatever. That's just like a personal thing. So leaving that up to my imagination makes it way more effective, gives it way more impact, because I'm doing it to myself. Robert Jordan doesn't go that way. He describes in detail how the place looks, and you have the tunnel with those like teeth or like spikes from the ceiling, and I'm like, this sounds suspiciously like a 80s plastic He-Man castle kind of play toy kind of thing. And I'm like, that's not, I don't need to know in detail, not detail, but like how they use human slaves that they found somewhere, not found somewhere, that they brought back from a raid to quench the steel for the Murdroll blades. I don't need to know those kind of things. Knowing it just makes it less scary for me, because it's the fear of the unknown that is taken away, and it doesn't. It's cheesy. It's cheesy uber evil. I get it, and that's sort of the problem that I have with this here. And it was sort of the same thing with the more or less detailed description of that opening, that prologue of the Great Hunt as well. It was like, yeah, I didn't want to know how Evil Incorporated is celebrating their Christmas parties. It it becomes mundane and boring and less evil and effective. And that's a problem because Robert Jordan clearly is looking for, with the Forsaken and the Dark One, who is apparently outside of creation in a way, right? Beyond the pattern of the weave and so forth. We're talking elemental evil. We're talking absolute evil. And that's a problem because, where you could... Yeah, it's not just people being assholes, which is the kind of evil that you can also find in other, but he's deliberately looking for supernatural evil, and yeah, by describing it too detailed, it just takes away all these effects and just makes it come across as cheesy and corny to me. Because sometimes less is more, and that's especially a thing when, fear, darkness, and horror should be evoked, I think. So that's my reason of why the evil parts just don't really work. And it's like, yeah. Also, we don't learn anything necessary from that bit, right? Demon Dread goes there. We hear that there's this new Uber Murderoll who is taller and darker and more murderally than anyone else. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. It doesn't give us anything except the Demon Dread, whom we have never met before. Maybe gets to be preferred Forsaken to the Dark One, maybe. And that's it. And I'm like, yeah, well, you could just drop that bit and we would not have actually lost any information. So there's that. Other bits and pieces of these prologues that I think we need to talk about. The meeting, first of all, a quick mention, we meet the first peddler whose nose is not further described, so I just wanted to, mention that. So there we are. And it brings, false information or rumors or whatever. What I wanted to look at is the whole, Aiel versus, Shido Aiel versus Aes Sedai of the White Tower / Black Aja kind of discussion thing. And there's two or three things that are interesting. One of them is obviously that at this point, I'm wondering if there are any Aes Sedai who are not Black Aja. Now, this may sound like hyperbole to you, but whenever we meet Aes Sedai and get their perspective, their personal perspective, with the possible exception of Elida, maybe Moiraine, and Swan Sanche. Everyone else turned out to be a dark friend. Everyone else, every other Aes Sedai that we got an inside perspective on, got their point of view, all of those turned out to be Black Aja. So I'm is there anyone else? Are they all Black Aja at this point? Which, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, that's just one thing. The other thing is that they're over the top arrogance just doesn't really work for me. It's the Aiel kind of almost conquered your city 20 years ago, and you're oh, those barbarians, we should teach them some manners. And I'm yeah, how? How, please? So yeah, that's sort of, I don't know, kind of the weird thing there. And on the other hand, you have Savannah, or whatever her name is, Savannah, the Shido Aiel, maybe Wise One, or at least Chief. Is there a female, specific female version of Chief? Whatever, you know that one. And she's once again, she's super stereotypical evil. It's we know she's evil because she wants power and control, which, is fine. For me, at least. And how do we find out? Well, she's especially, ambitious. She also is the one Aiel woman that actually shows her boobs, because that will definitely help her gain power, right? Especially when she, walks into this place of Aes Sedai, right? Where she can't seduce anyone. Or maybe homosexuality exists in these books, but I haven't encountered it so far, so I'm wondering why that, it doesn't make any sense. It's more for us, the reader, we need to be reminded of how she is always displaying herself as part of, her evil ways, which kind of ties back into that whole thing with Berylane and others, it is always sort of implied, heavily implied, that women displaying their sexuality is actually, or displaying their body for whatever motives, is fundamentally wrong. No matter whether they do that because they want to, or whether it is because they want to, use that asset in some way or another, it is fundamentally wrong, unless they obviously do it for their own man, but that's about it. And that's, like, I don't know, that connection between sexuality or general, I guess mostly sexuality and moral badness in a way is something that I find highly disturbing, because it is unnecessary in this situation, and it just like gets done again. I guess the only interesting aspect here is that Savannah got a magic cube from someone to do something bad to Rand with, which, fine by me. I hope it's the thing from Hellraiser. That would be really funny, but I fear it's not. So yeah, we have and this is a general thing that we see with the entirety of this prologue. It is very much built on the idea that no one knows what's going on. There's all kinds of rumors. People that would not believe rumors before suddenly believe all kinds of rumors. And all these misunderstandings will lead to a catastrophe. We already know that. That's just something that Robert Jordan does a lot of. And in this prologue, over time, it becomes a bit too over the top for me. But I don't know. We'll see how much of that will actually happen and how much of it is just implied there. But we have the peddler who says who tells Gawain that Morghese has been killed by Rand potentially, and Rand has maybe even killed Elaine. And I'm like, why is Gawain actually believing that? It's whatever. And then we have the whole situation with Morghese, which we need to talk about because that one is absolutely horrible. Stuff like that. It's just it's too much for me, but we'll see how much of it will actually turn into something, how much is just in this prologue and then gets forgotten conveniently by Robert Jordan, because that could also just happen. All right. Quick one. Two Forsaken get reconstituted as grown-ups, so not reincarnated, but actually rebuilt as already adult human beings. Which ones? I don't know. There's 6 of them that are dead, and I have no idea which one these 2 are. I guess if I had paid more attention, I could at least guess the name of one of them. But we'll see. We'll see. They have new names now, and we'll do something. Who the fuck? I mean, I don't care. We'll see what comes of it. It's more like the precedence is a bit of a worrying thing, because if it means that Forsaken can just get new bodies whenever they feel like it, or their boss feels like it, is I don't know. Is there any way to destroy them outside of Balefire, which you should not do? We will see. To quote someone, death loses meaning if that happens. Well, I would not say it loses meaning, but I'm just saying it's a bit weird. Whatever. What else was interesting? All right, 2 things that we need to talk about. 3, probably more. Morghese and Tullanvor in Amardesia, and it's all of it is so fucking wrong. Because we once again come to the point that Robert Jordan just loves to humiliate women. The more powerful, the better. Morghese is in exile here, apparently, and the way we find... she realized that she's in exile is that Tullanvor is, basically pushing her around, and almost, doing everything short of, physically forcing himself on her. So far, and she's like, I can't do anything about it because... And I'm like, of course you can. You can just fucking slap the boy. It's fine. Anyway, she's trying to get money and stuff out of the king of Amerdisia, and then the white cloak dude shows up and is like, Petron Niles, like, I can help you. And then there's like a third one, those like traders are like, we can help you, Morghese, and we'll have to wait and see where this is going. But the overall atmosphere of like everyone treating Morghese like crap, because why not, I find highly problematic. Because either, I mean, the question is, if everyone treats her like that now, like, do they have like any respect for the person, or is it all just because she was like, powerful and had an army to control? Now she doesn't have the army. She has nothing. Even people who profess to be loyal and love her, like Talonwars, like, yeah, and that just like makes no sense to me. It just like, I don't know, right? I'll do it again. Talonwars is saying like, you fucked up your kingdom, so you can't order me around, is like literally the most ridiculous action whatsoever. And like, and her old nursemaid Leni is even worse, and she's like, yeah, well, just go and fuck the boy. And no, that's not how that works. But then again, we've not really come to expect from anything else from Robert Jordan, because relationships are kind of weird in these books. So yeah, that whole bit I found like really, kind of disturbing almost, how Talonvor treats Morghese and how that is apparently okay. I mean, she doesn't like it, but there's nothing she can do. And other women like Leni, and whatever the name of that Kyrian woman is, both approve. And it's like, yeah, just take him, man. He wants you. And she's like, no, he's behaving like a dickhead in that situation. So yeah, is a problem, right? What else? Slavery, sort of, right? Because Moghedien is Moghedien is now Morgaine, or something like Morrigan. Well, whatever. She is under control of Nynaeve and Elaine and Swan Sanche and whatever her name is. Iliana, whatever, that one. Through a new and improved item. And suddenly it's totally fine to enslave people and use pain to make them do whatever you want. Now I can see that contextualized with what happens in chapters 1, 2, and 3. I can see that Robert Jordan is trying to talk about the idea of necessity. And that the goal justifies the means, that kind of thing, right? That he's trying to play with that. It just feels weird because there's no like fundamental, like, it's wrong to enslave people. It's more like, I don't want to work with her. I'd rather kill her than that. It's like, that's weird. You can't go and like really hate on the Shan-Chan with like what they do and then just do the same thing to Moghedien. You can't. And there's like no really moral qualms that anyone has in that situation. I don't know. We obviously also have that whole conversation with Min and Elaine again, because they're, both in love with Rand and don't know how to sort this out. And it's just the usual Robert Jordan not getting human interactions, but that will probably never change, and I'm just about to give up on that aspect of it. Especially in connection with the Rand Avienda thing in those chapters, what we're going to come back to in a second. Alright, another thing that is interesting is definitely Fail and Perrin are kinda ruling the two rivers now. We see that from Fail's perspective. We see her governing the people. And that's very libertarian out there. Very, very neoliberal. I'll just say it that way. It's like, yeah, no taxes, but people voluntarily give stuff. It's also obviously so that either people will fail, refugees will either fail because they're not good enough to actually start their business, or they'll, actually, free market competition kind of thing going down. And I'm like, I don't think that's how feudalism works. So maybe you're mixing weird ideas there. Bobby J. But yeah, we'll see where that goes. I'm not. Most of it's just like okay, up to the point where we get like the next big Taviran kick in the nuts, which is Perrin now knows that he has to go back to Rand because he can feel it on a subconscious level, I assume. And that's sort of something that I think is almost new. Like, we had these situations earlier when it was like, Matt trying to leave, and then like every time he tried to leave, something happened that forced him to stay around Rand. And I could like live with that because it mostly shows how the pattern kind of builds around the 2 or 3, and I can live with that. But this sort of like Rand just puts on like the bat signal, and Perrin has to run to wherever. It just feels more like a plot convention than Taviran felt before already. That's, I don't know, just a bit lame, I think. But I don't know. I mean, also, what's wrong with Rand, like, knowing what's going on and just sending a message, right? Could have happened, right? He's already in Camelin, which is not too... I mean, it's still weeks away, but, we have time and stuff. He could send a message, but he doesn't. Instead of, like, that, it has to be, like, this magical feeling of Perrin having to go to Rand's side. Yeah. Well. Yeah, what else was there interesting? Like, Petra Niles' perspective on the whole thing, this being like the war against Trollocs, and there is no darker things beyond that, and Rand definitely is a false dragon idea. Is like, I can see where this is going, but it's sort of like, it feels almost like he's willfully ignorant and trying to ignore the world and stuff like that. And that's sort of what I meant with this prologue, having all these weird, like, willful misunderstandings and willful miscommunications. We have too many of them in this one like opening like prologue, I think. But we will see where that will be going in the next couple of chapters once the story actually picks up. So all in all, yeah, it's a prologue. We check in with others. I'm glad that we get Perrin and Fael back. I was missing those. I'm not really excited about the new Forsaken, like the old Forsaken that we haven't met before, like, Semirog and Demondred. Like, I don't care. Like, none of these Forsaken, with the possible exception of Lanfear and maybe Asmodean, have any form of personality that I care about. And that's a problem. It's like, they're just like these super evil beings that do all these terrible things, and I kind of know that, but I just don't care about them. So yeah, whatever. There's one theory that I need to explore further, and that is Min and Elaine. And I know Robert Jordan likes to play around with words and stuff, right? And like different pronunciations or changes, slight changes in name and stuff. I know he likes to do that. And it's interesting to me that Ilyena, whatever Lews Theron's love was, he sounds very similar to Elaine. And then there is Min, and I keep forgetting her real name. At Lanfear's real name was Mirren or something like that. So there's also like a similar sound in there. So I'm wondering if there's like a connection that he builds up for later on. And with that, let's talk about those 3 chapters and what's wrong with them. Because, oh boy. Right, mainly, like, first chapter is pretty boring. It's Rand fighting people because he likes to train. And then we have a conversation with Davram Bashir, who is Fael's father, I think, about why he should do that, should do it or don't do it or whatever. And we get what Robert Jordan thinks is court intrigue in Camelin and Andor, which is mostly him trying to use more disparaging words to describe the nobility that was under Ravin's kind of spell, and they're sort of the evil ones, and for whatever reason, we spent way too much time with that, and nothing really happens, and all of them are kind of very clumsy when it comes to how they try to do intrigues and stuff. and it's boring. Whatever, and then Mazrim Time shows up, brings Rand another one of those seals, and that's sort of where we hit the first real problem that I have. And it's a larger thing, and I'll need to keep an eye on it for like the future. But basically, the problem that I have with it is like Rand is supposed to go mad because he channels, right? And that's something that I find highly problematic, because the way it is described is, at this point, Rand hearing the voice of Lews Therin telling him to kill someone, to not trust someone, to break the seal and whatnot. And it's like, that's a very, very weird idea of talking about like mental health in a way. Because, it is basically used as a like negative stereotype and cliche of like people hearing voices, and we've used that as a like shorthand for mental health issues way too long, and we kind of see that going down here again. I'm like, is that clever to do that? And then we have Bashir talking about like this other general who was supposedly mad because he and I kind of find like using the word madness for mental health problems is, I mean, I guess it's mostly a problem of this being written like the early 90s, and we've kind of moved on, at least linguistically, from those days when it comes to talking about like things like mental health. But it's definitely something that annoys me about it, right? And then we have Mazrim Time showing up, who is supposedly, a false dragon. He's like, yeah, I'll help you. He's very proud and powerful, but it's like, so I don't know. But if Mazrim Time turns out to actually be a traitor, to betray Rand and be an evil guy later on, I'd be very pissed off, because he comes across like that from the beginning. And I don't know, with 6 books in now, we could maybe find a little subtlety and not like have every character be like every evil character be suspicious from the right from the beginning. So I'm hoping. I don't know. I guess I'll find out in one of the future books. Anyway, they move to that like farm and do stuff, test people on whether they want to, use magic. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Because it's built up as like, yeah, I'll call people, and people come to Rand to learn how to channel. While at the same time, it is well known, we get told again and again and again, that men are not supposed to channel and should be afraid. So why would anyone choose to actively learn? Now, if there would be people showing up that like Rand or Mazrim Time kind of, started channeling by themselves, right? And did not need any training, I could totally see that idea of, the amnesty of like, if you are a man and channel, you don't need to hide from the Aes Sedai. You can come to us, we'll help you as far as we can, and you help us to fight the Dark One. I'm good with that. But people who don't even know that they can channel, why would they go to the Dragon Reborn while obviously being afraid of channeling and say, yeah, teach us how to channel? They have no reason to do that. I mean, if they want to fight evil, they could just like sign up to be soldiers anyways. Like, why? There's a bit of a disconnect there that I don't know. I don't think this will work out. It just doesn't add up to me, is what I'm trying to say here. But yeah, that's sort of the end of it. We kind of know that apparently the Rand Avienda thing is still going on. Rand is still uncomfortable around Avienda, is trying to hide from her. And I'm so tired of that whole fucking thing. They should just like actually get that shit sorted out. I mean, whatever. And he's planning to do something about Samael. That's sort of the plan there. And that's where I stopped today. I'll get back to it tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get a bit like of a clearer view of like how things will pan out in these books, what will happen with those different groups of Aes Sedai that are all trying to get Rand on their side. I mean, we're still not wondering about like why Aes Sedai have any power in the world, because it doesn't make any sense, but Not today. I'll harp on it tomorrow, I think. Anyway, I'm glad to be back, even though it's only Wheel of Time. I have other things in my brain that I will talk about really soon, I promise. And until then, have a great day, and I'll talk to you very soon. Cheers.